Good morning. It is Friday, May the 17th, about 9:15 a.m. This is meteorologist Shay Gibson with Leading Edge Weather and Sail Flow, bringing you a final forecast for the Savannah Cup 2024, sponsored by Ashley Yachts. So few subtle changes, right? We have a few changes in the afternoon, maybe a little bit more of a chance of storms. And then also overnight jetting might actually be a little stronger than anticipated. Some of the earlier models were sniffing at it a little bit. Now there's a little bit more agreement. We'll get into that shortly. Let's go ahead and put me down in the corner of the screen. I'm on the CORA website here. We can go to the home page and scroll down for the Savannah Cup. Information is all there for you, along with the CORA Summer Series. And then also in the skipper's information, offshore wind and weather is where you'll find the forecast. So you have the preliminary, the official that was done on Wednesday last night at the skipper's meeting. Was the main forecast, and then today is the final, just as a wrap up. But let's go ahead and look at the surface map. What's going on right now? We are, we talked about this last night and last couple of days where we're just kind of in a stagnant area where we just don't have a lot of activity going on. We have high pressure that's just heat flux high pressure along the coast, high pressure inland, a couple of different lobes. We're just in a very weak environment where normally we would have a big Atlantic high driving the southerly winds up the coastline. Now we just have light gradients sitting across the area with a southwest flow to start, which will be slowly backing more of a south to south-southeast, maybe even southeast by the time we're in late afternoon and evening. But as we go into time, we see that high pressure shifting offshore as expected, a little bit more ridging immediately along the coastline. And we see some of that inland troughing develop just inland in the lowlands, just below the midlands. And then the one feature we need to start watching here is this low or this warm front. It's going to start welling up into Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, and all these areas. This warm front's going to be lifting up across this zone, which means the moisture profile is going to be increasing. If this front pulls all the way up to the southern Appalachians, that's where we start to see that nocturnal jetting profile increase. The only problem is it may try to throw some convective activity at us overnight hours because we don't have a strong high in place to thwart those storms inland, and also that moisture is coming in from the west eventually. So that's the thinking behind it. If we go a little bit farther out into Sunday or Saturday night, we see the front lifting, but I think there's going to be enough troughing activity inland, just enough to get that nocturnal jet flowing, and it won't be a southwest jet. It'll be more of a southerly jet, and I think it's going to be more driven by convective activities, and so we'll get into that momentarily. Again, I'm going to use South Folly since it's a near shore sensor. Well, you know what? We'll go to Fort Sumter Front Range Light first here. And then the Charleston 80, the one that's 18 miles out, actually just came back online. So we're in good shape there for that point of data. But it looks like, there's a little bit of model agreement. The 2 kilometer and some of the higher resolution ones are coming up to 10 knots by 2 o'clock p.m. So that's good for the racers. However, the NAM3 and others are staying a little bit on the lower side. So I've bumped it up a knot across the board. So I think by 2 o'clock, we're going to have 4 to 8 knots, somewhere in this range here. And that'll be a telltale that the sea breeze is filling in. I think we're still going to see some of that oscillating between south and south-southeast, where we're going to be at 160 to 180 degrees. I don't think it's going to be perfect. And some of these high resolution models, the TRIM, which is an AI model, and the 2 kilometer are both hinting towards a little bit of an easterly element in that south wind. The NAM3 pulling for a full easterly, it might be a little bit out to lunch on that run, but either way, it might just be reading into some storm activity too, making a shift in the wind field. So I'll go with these three right here for the guidance, but I think the speeds are going to be a little bit on the light side to start. And then again, by the time we hit 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock for that next race, we have a 2 o'clock leave and we have a 5 o'clock leave. And so that, by 5 o'clock, I think we're going to be up in that 6 to 10 knot range. And by 7, we're up to 7, 11 knots. And then as we go over to the nighttime hours, and this is where I'm going to go offshore a little bit, right? So I'm going to go, we don't have the Fripp buoy, but we do have the Charleston 80, and the offshore profile looks a lot more robust than the nearshore profile in that you see this surge, a lot of model agreement with a surge all the way up to 15 to 19 knots in the early morning hours between, say about 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. And then some of these wilder ones up here, these outliers, are trying to read some storm activities that are trying to move in the area, or some convective showers, I should say, which would drive the winds up. But with so much disagreement in the wind speeds and this yield in between, I still think, we talked about last night, 11 to 15 knots was going to be kind of a push to get to, but not unheard of. And I do think that, that 8 to 12 could grow to 11 to 15, and we do have potential for it to go 14 to 18. Anything more than that would probably be related to some convective activity. So just be aware that as the moisture profile grows over the area, we're going to see clouding pushing out over the coast again. We're not going to have a dry line like we did a couple days ago. We'll see this profile building. So just, I would say, be prepared. Be ready for 11 to 15 knots overnight, but be also prepared for 14 to 18 with a few higher gusts into the low 20s. That's not off the table. And this is, again, 18 miles out offshore, where your nocturnal jetting profile can actually grow a little bit stronger than what it would be near shore. And again, you'll be farther southeast or southwest down the coast away from this area. It may be a little calmer as you're heading towards Savannah overnight hours too, which is why I'm sticking with that 11 to 15 knot range. So if that helps. So with the winds, we talked about the winds. Now we look at the NAM3. I'm just looking at this for some guidance here. The NAM3 is kind of on and off with some rain. It looks like most of it, fizzles out by the time it tries to arrive here this afternoon. It's showing a little bit of rain activity late afternoon, evening, and then drying out, and not much else to speak of overnight hours. But if we look at, say, the FV3 high res, we see there's a little bit of a different story here. So again, we look at overnight hours, we get into this afternoon, not much activity there, but the HRRR you'll see is going to be a little bit different. And then overnight hours, we see a little bit, and this is 6Z, 06Z, 05Z, which means 4 hours behind. So we're at 2 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., we see this convective activity trying to approach the coastline and move over. And that's why I think some of those miles are really jumping up a little high based on some of that outflow or maybe even inflow if you're on the west side of the storm, depending on where you are. So that's going to be the tricky part for today. If you look at the HRRR, this most recent run shows maybe a swath of showers pulling through by late morning, midday, then a break, and then we have quite a few scattered showers and possible embedded storms moving through by late afternoon and evening, and then fizzling out up into a certain point. The HRRR stops there at about 11 o'clock tonight. But just be aware of the potential for some shower and storm activity. I think the more severe weather that's slated for Saturday is going to be in the afternoon and evening tomorrow. So I don't think we have a lot of severe potential there for overnight hours, but just be aware that you may have a few showers and storms passing through later today, and into the early morning hours. So the prior run for the HRRR goes out, and you see a lot of that breaking up in the afternoon, and then we have one line coming through, and then that's about it. Most of the rest fizzles out in the evening. So again, it's not going to be a perfect setup. There's no one model that's going to be exactly right on everything. But the main thing to keep in mind is that we're going to be dealing with a modest wind to start, or a light wind to start for the 2 o'clockers. 5 o'clock, we'll start to head towards those modest values, and then we grow overnight. And then again, the winds, we talked about the winds veering overnight, and that's exactly what I think is going to continue to happen as we get into the evening, nighttime. We're at between a 150 or a 140 and 180 degree range. Overnight, we start to veer south, and eventually by 5 a.m., 7 a.m., we're looking at south-southwest, and we're starting to veer over towards more of a 190 degree phase or 200 degree phase by the time the sun comes up. So again, an oscillating but yet veering slowly wind overnight. Watch for those moderate values in the early morning hours with some possible chances for shower activity or maybe an embedded storm. Just keep your eye on radar for anything that develops that would draw straight line winds and a very strong gust, but nothing severe expected until at least tomorrow afternoon, evening. Wave action, we're still looking at that one. If we zoom in, we look at that forecast, still looking at that same range. This model hasn't updated yet, so it's still working off of the 15th for data, but I still think we're going to have about maybe 1.5 feet from the east, southeast, or southeast, short period, 6 seconds. And I think we're going to be just fine on the wave action out there. Unless the winds really ramp up, you may get a little bit of a cross cut on that south cross cut along that southeasterly swell. But otherwise, I think we're in good shape. The high air temperatures are going to remain in the mid to upper 80s today and tomorrow, with temperatures falling off on Monday due to some northerly winds. But with that said, I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off for this final forecast. Hopefully, it gives everybody a little bit more value for today. I think there'll be enough wind. A southerly wind actually would be better because you can probably hit the run line a little bit better, maybe not straight down the coast, but at least you have a little bit more of an attack angle on it. um, rather than a headwind from the southwest flow, which would be hitting by tomorrow morning sunrise. So either way, y'all make sure that you're safe on your way out. Keep your eye on radar. I'll be in touch with those that I have their numbers to get any information out for any storm activities that may be a problematic issue, and they'll get that on the radio. But otherwise, Godspeed, have a good time, and stay safe, everyone. Thanks a lot.